Looks like our hard work paid off. The storm's passed and the town's still standing. Still, we better check for damage. I've marked your destination at the harbor.
just have a great time.
Those situations, they were the monkeys were part of this experiment where they were kind of doing like Pavlov's dog, right? So the monkeys would get this little drop of juice, which it really loved, and a light would come on in advance of the juice. And what they were looking at in the brain for when the spike of dopamine might happen. So you would expect, if the monkey loves the juice, that the spike of dopamine would happen when the juice arrived, right? And that is what happened initially. The monkey drinks the juice, the dopamine spike's done. After a while, the monkey learns that the light comes on before the juice arrives. Now, what's interesting is that when the monkey actually gets the juice then, it's like, okay, cool, I was sort of expecting that. You know, that's absolutely fine. If, however, you decide to not give them...
Exactly. And so boredom and stress and anxiety have this weird opposite relationship later on. At the time, contemporaneously, you're unhappy. But then later on, you go, man, that's the happiest I ever was.
Okay, well, I think it only seems right to start off with what on earth boredom actually is. How the hell do you even study it? I mean, do you just put people in a room and not let anything happen?
Yeah. No, you actually, that is what you do. Or you have them sit down and do something that's really repetitive and meaningless.
Is meaningless part of it then?
Yeah, that's a part of it. Because if people feel like they're doing a task in a laboratory, like say sorting shapes or solving problems, and that maybe there's like a competitive nature and they want to impress the researchers or beat their own personal records, there's too much meaning there. It needs to feel like, man, this is dumb. Like you can tell people that they're just helping calibrate the machine before the actual test begins, and that is much more boring because they feel like it doesn't matter. It's just for the machine, it's to like warm up the mouse or whatever. Those are great. If you let people just sit with nothing to do, they can often entertain themselves quite a bit, and often subjects will just take a nap. So you need to make sure that they don't relax. You have to make sure that they're in that like uncomfortable zone of I'm bored and I can't escape.
That's an interesting thought, the idea that if you're sat alone in a chair with nothing to entertain you, you can quite easily... I'm thinking here about kids who fidget in their chairs or like wiggle their feet or kind of pull their hair, just to sort of have some kind of sensory input that's kind of continually there.
That's right, yeah, and I think that we're going to keep stumbling into this as we try to kill people with boredom. We're going to find that the body heals from boredom, just like a cut heals through platelets and whatnot. When you're bored, your brain goes, no, not going to do this. We need the stimulation, and you come up with ways to entertain yourself.
If we're going to bore people, if we're going to make this the most boring podcast of all time, you have to sit. You're not allowed to fall asleep. You're not allowed to wiggle. You're not allowed to jiggle your feet. No twiddling your thumbs. No playing with your hair. You just got to sit. What happens when you do that? When you put people in those kind of passive waiting conditions?
They don't die. So we're not quite there yet.
No.
But they do become anxious. Or I think they actually become a little bit disgusted.
It has been described as a negative experience, agreed, where the desire to engage in stimulating and satisfying activity is frustrated. That's quite key, actually, I think, because there's definitely been moments in my life when I've been particularly busy where the thought of like sitting in a chair and not doing anything would actually be quite appealing.
Yes.
But this definition being like you're not allowed to do something, frustration of wanting to be stimulated and not able to be. Researchers believe it contains an emotional element characterized by a lack of pleasure or meaning.
Yeah. You know what? I'm seeing kind of two things here. There's relaxing and then there's boring.
Yeah.
So the producers, of course, are always telling us to make the show more interesting, and I hate being told what to do. And so boredom is the topic today. I brought this book. It's literally called This Book Will Put You to Sleep.
Amazing.
And so fair warning, if you're driving listening to this podcast, watch out. This book is made to be as boring as possible, and it's good for reading before you go to bed. It's got, for example, a bunch of clocks. What time is it? And it's just a bunch of little clip art pictures of clocks that you can look at.
Is there any pattern to the times across the different clocks?
Yeah, they're all just like 1 minute ahead of each other.
Oh.
So it's really, here's a staring contest with 48 cats. You can just stare at them and see who goes first. This one is a taxonomy of micro moths. And it's just the most boring description of small moths. And they use a lot of scientific Latin phrases.
I've got an actually surprisingly high threshold.
I know, and that's what I've noticed too. I cannot get bored by this. Like even this bit about micro moths. I'll read you the first couple of sentences. The Microlepidoptera micromoths are a non-monophyletic group of families of moth. As it is a non-monophyletic group, micromoth enthusiasts generally use the property of smallness as a way of identifying micromoths. Moths with a wingspan of less than 20 millimeters qualify as micromoths. And it goes on and on like that, and then I keep going, oh my gosh, there's a definition of what a micromoth is. And then it talks about how it's hard to identify them because you can't see the differences on their wings because they're too small. And then I just wind up staying up all night reading the book that's supposed to put me to sleep.
Maybe you're immune. Maybe you're immune from boredom.
Maybe, but I think that this is getting at two different things. One is I want to relax my brain and be distracted from all the things that I'm thinking about so I can sleep. And then there's, I want to do stuff, but I can't because I'm in a waiting room at the dentist's office and I'm bored. Boredom is a negative experience. And it is an emotion that motivates us to move away, to find something new and different.
So here's another nice definition. A situation becomes maximally boring when it combines three factors. One, nothing new is happening, everything is fully expected, and the activity feels pointless. Which makes me think, frankly, your book is out. It failed on all three counts.
Yeah, it's not pointless. It really fails that third one for a lot of reasons. One is just that I find micro moths interesting, I guess, but also because as like a content creator, I just keep reading this going, this is content. Like I've already made a YouTube short about this book, and I struggled to find something that was legitimately boring. Like there's one it's called A Few Facts About Minor Belgian Politicians. And they talk about like who was the deputy prime minister for a couple of months in this interim period in the 2000s. And I'm just like, I want to Wikipedia this person. What an interesting minor position to have. But that's because I'm always thinking about how do I get views on this? And there's always a way.
Yeah.
All right. But what would be boring to me is something that's pointless. And that gets to that frustration definition that you brought up, the feeling of I'm being stopped from activities that I would rather be doing.
I tell you what is interesting about this though is that we all know this experience. We've all can completely connect with the idea of sitting in the dentist feeling frustrated. But it is interesting that there is something going on in our brains that does react so viscerally to these kind of situations where nothing new is happening, where everything is fully expected, and where the activity feels pointless. And I think part of the reason for this is that our brains, and I think this is increasingly the sort of view of scientists, is that our brains are basically these prediction machines, trying to work out what's going to happen next with reality, predict it, and then it feels happy when it gets the prediction correct, and sort of gets a little bit of jolt, dissatisfaction if it gets it wrong. You can notice this really clearly if you ever try and step off of a static escalator. You know that experience that I'm talking about here?
Oh yeah, I think it's called the elevator effect. Like it's a whole thing with the name, yeah.
Where escalator effect, no?
What did I say, elevator?
Yeah.
Ah, see, I'm just keeping you on your toes.
Yeah, not boring. Everything wasn't fully expected.
Escalator effect. Yeah, that's when you step off an escalator, or when you step onto an escalator that is off.
Yes,
and you feel like you're losing your balance.
Yeah, and it's because your brain is making a prediction that it's then getting wrong. There was this really incredible study with monkeys. It's like one of the most important science papers, neuroscience papers. Certainly one of my favorites, let me put it that way, where they were monitoring the neurons in the brains of monkeys. They had these really unbelievably fine wires that were basically eavesdropping on what these neurons were doing in the monkey's brain. And they were, the monkeys were part of this experiment where they were kind of doing like Pavlov's dog, right? So the monkeys would get this little drop of juice, which it really loved, and a light would come on in advance of the juice. And what they were looking at in the brain for when the spike of dopamine might happen. So you would expect, if the monkey loves the juice, that the spike of dopamine would happen when the juice arrived, right? And that is what happened initially. The monkey drinks the juice, the dopamine spike's done. after a while, the monkey learns that the light comes on before the juice arrives. Now, what's interesting is that when the monkey actually gets the juice, then it's like, okay, cool, I was sort of expecting that. That's absolutely fine. If, however, you decide to not give the monkey the juice, it's predicted it's about to get some, and then the juice never arrives. The monkey is pissed. The monkey does not like that at all. But the other way around, if you don't put the light on, and then you just give the monkey the juice, so it's not predicting it, and then the juice arrives, it's even more happy than it would be if it was predicting something. If you put that another way, I always think of this as like, okay, if I'm walking down the street and I unexpectedly stumble across £20, it makes me way, way, way happier to have found this unexpected £20 that I didn't predict than if somebody, a friend of mine who owes me £20, gives me the £20. It's like, yeah, cool, thank you very much. I knew that was coming. I appreciate it. When you are like predicting the world and something better than predicted happens, your brain is like super excited about it. And likewise, the reverse, if you predict that something good is going to happen and it doesn't, your brain is extremely unhappy. But this is like one of the pieces of evidence that we have, and there's a whole multitude, and you could do many episodes on just this, about the fact that the way that our brain works essentially is that it is assessing the sensory inputs, it is going through all of the information that is coming in, it's making predictions about what is going to happen next, and then it is rewarding itself based on whether those predictions turn out to be true. And so in a situation where nothing new is happening, where everything is fully expected, both of those situations basically mean that the brain is starved of the opportunity to make predictions.
Yeah. I love that they used monkeys and did it so methodically in a laboratory, because it's something that is very relatable to our day-to-day experiences. And it really shows how deep of an evolutionary process this is. This need for enrichment and for cognitive stimulation, that we need to exercise that. And we literally do in order to keep brain cells alive and help them keep strong connections. And I don't think we see this in all living organisms. But once you get into warm-blooded ones, once you get into mammals, they really need that cognitive stimulation. When you deny it to them, they feel disgusted in a way, and they seek out other places and things and thoughts.
You said that boredom was like disgust, though. Do you see? Wait, one, how? And two, is that universal across animals?
Well, disgust is universal. It is one of the first. First things you see in a life form, because what it is that it's on the spectrum of approach and withdrawal, right? That's a thing that not all life forms, the earliest ones they just existed. But one of the first behaviors you see in an organism through increasing complexity is suddenly an interest in approaching certain things and withdrawing from other things. And disgust is the emotion associated with withdrawal. And so Plutchik, on his famous Wheel of Emotions, which if you want to just have a great time looking at how emotions might be related, look up Plutchik's emotion wheel. He put boredom on the same spoke as disgust, making boredom, in his opinion, a more diluted, weaker form of disgust, because ultimately boredom motivates us to withdraw, to say, okay, I can't just sit in this chair. I'm going to pick up a magazine and read this while I wait for the doctor. I've got to change the environment. And it's different than curiosity, where you wonder about something and you're looking for knowledge and you approach it. It's instead, you're actually withdrawing to whatever necessary. Like, if I'm bored and I just start tapping with the pencil, I'm not curious about the pencil's properties. Mm-hmm. I'm disgusted by the lack of anything stimulating me, and so I start doing this.
But then actually, if you consider that in an environment where you have a bit more freedom, right? So maybe not dentist chairs, because I don't think our evolutionary past was like had dentists particularly in mind. But if you do find yourself in an environment where there is nothing new, where everything is fully expected, and the activity feels pointless, I mean, those three kind of definitions again, then it's like, well, yeah, you are. You probably do need to get up and go away and move somewhere else. You probably do need some kind of emotion that motivates you to find a better environment.
That's right. And before we go to Mars, I just want to say one more thing that is related to this feeling of how deep it is. Your monkey study reminds me of some studies that were done on mice. We all are familiar with the little wheels that we put in mouse cages or rat cages, gerbils, and they run on them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us think that we put those in there because they lack in a cage the enrichment they would normally get, the exercise they would normally get out in the wild, right? Mm-hmm. But some researchers questioned that, and they decided to put mouse wheels out in the woods. They just put them out, and they put cameras in the woods pointed at these mouse wheels, and sure enough, mice loved them.
Wild mice.
Wild mice love to run in circles, going nowhere on a mouse wheel. You put it out, in the middle of the forest, and they're like, yeah, finally, I can run and not go anywhere. Because the mammalian brain, the warm-blooded brain, craves stimulation. And I think that in a lot of ways, the internet is a mouse wheel in the wild. I've got this whole wide world in front of me, and yet I would rather run on a mouse wheel, just like a real mouse. It is deep within us, this distaste for boredom.
But then also this very easy, distilled, original way to entertain yourself, I guess, both the wheel and the internet.
Yeah.
Actually, so that thing about mice running around in wheels in cages, and then there's analogies between humans and animals. I think there's a really interesting experiment that's happened. It's called the Mars 500 project. This is basically, people are wondering about whether it will be possible to do a human-led mission to Mars. But if you do so, it's going to take a long time to get to Mars. And so we have to run not just experiments about the physics of rockets and spaceships, but also the psychological experiments of what it means for a small group of people to be confined in what is, effectively a little bigger than a hamster or a mouse cage for a really, really long period of time. So what they've done, they ran this European simulation in Moscow. They called Mars 500. They had 6 volunteers, 3 Russians, 1 Frenchman, 1 Italian Colombian, and 1 Chinese person. And they spent 520 days in this environment. It was there was strict confinement, limited social contact. They were in the same room, same surroundings. They're like unbelievably routine schedules that didn't sort of change. No light, no sort of external sounds, anything like that. And initially people were all right about it. Like, they were okay initially. They decided to create a boredom scale just to see how people were handling it. And it went from emotional flatness, was sort of the first step on this boredom ladder, as it were. Kind of, do you feel a bit indifferent about what happens today? All the way through to sort of loss of curiosity. Which is, I can't really be bothered to do anything at all. To time distortion. Does today feel like it's lasted much longer than it should do or would do? Through to social weariness. Would you prefer to avoid everyone else? And then to actual physical lethargy. Like, do you feel physically slow even after you've rested? They really, by the time it got to 2/3 of the way through, they were really, really, really struggling. One crew member said that every day he started to feel so identical that he started deliberately misplacing objects just to have something to look for. They had a treadmill, sort of the human version of the mouse wheel, a treadmill schedule that was so rigid that one of them said that they could tell the time by the sound of the other person's footsteps.
Wow.
It was, I think, not fun. They just did not enjoy it at all.
I love that little trick, that little life hack of deliberate...
deployed some additional support. Supplies, vehicles, that kind of thing. But you'll need to jump in the crane and move all those containers out of the way first. And then you'll need to check the road from the harbor base to the transit point and clear out any hazards. Once that's done, you can plot a route for our vehicles.
Deliberately misplacing things just to give yourself something to do, because that is what we find. And this goes back to the body's self-healing boredom avoidance abilities. If you make people really bored, they would rather hurt themselves than continue to be bored.
Go on.
In the experiment, you show participants a button that if they push, will administer an electric shock. Like the button is metal, and when they push it, they get this very uncomfortable, but not dangerous shock.
And presumably these are people who don't want to be shocked.
Yeah, and people don't want this. They don't like it. Some people will try it, and they'll be like, oh gosh, yeah, I hate that. And then you tell them, okay, cool. Well, anyway, the receptionist will come in when we're ready for the real study. And you leave them all alone in a waiting room with nothing to do but the button to look at. They don't look at it for long. The majority of people, after you make them wait long enough, I'm talking like up to 30 minutes, an hour, they'll eventually push it again. And then they'll do it again. And they'll keep doing it because they would rather be in pain than do nothing and wait.
Can I tell you my favorite thing? This particular story, my favorite thing about this is that there is a gender split in how people respond to this button. So you are right, 67% of men will choose to shock themselves at least once. One man pressed the shock button nearly 200 times during this experiment, but only 25% of women.
Only 25% of women.
I have no idea what that means. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that tells us.
I think that means a lot about how our culture, how we're like a culture to act. Yeah, I don't know what to say, but there's so much more that could be researched. I want to bring back another season of Minefield, and we should look into this. Like, what do you learn about someone based on how quickly they decide to ease the boredom with some pain?
Okay, well, so far I think we haven't done very well at either boring our listeners to death or working out whether it is possible to bore people to death. But we're going to do better. In the second half, you can come back where we are going to talk about the extreme effects that can happen when boredom goes far.
Yeah, things are going to get a lot more boring. Stay tuned. All right, so welcome back. We are discussing how to kill a person with boredom. And we haven't gotten any closer to an answer. And I'm not feeling optimistic, Anna. I did some research. I found when bored, brain activity decreases by about 5%. That's it.
Oh.
And then I was like, well, wait, brain activity is even lower in a coma, and yet people can survive those. They're living during them. I'm just wondering if boredom is not directly lethal. Our only hope is that it might be indirectly lethal.
Right, I would say don't try killing someone with boredom at home, but I mean, if it's unsuccessful, then maybe you can.
Yeah.
Maybe it's absolutely fine.
What kind of consequences can happen when people get really bored?
Like beyond just a little bit bored in a dentist's office.
Yeah.
It can be so much worse than the things that we're describing. Because the thing about that Mars experiment even is that there were 6 of them. They had like tasks to do. They were able to talk to ground control, sort of simulated ground control. There were things to keep them occupied. Plus, also, the entire way through, just go back to that definition, the activity didn't feel pointless. It felt like they were taking part in an experiment that would, assist in the future of humanity and space exploration.
Yeah, it was monotonous but meaningful, and they had hope.
Exactly right. But there have been some experiments into really, really low stimulation environments and the effect of that has on us. One of the first ones came from McGill University. This is like the 50s and the 60s. And it starts off and you're like, oh, this kind of sounds like quite a fun little experiment. The sort of psychology studies that they do that are kind of cute and interesting. So they got 22 students. They paid them $20 a day in 1950, which is substantial, like enough to be a genuine motivator. And they asked them to stay in this cubicle. They gave them these goggles that were like fogged, so there wasn't really any sort of visual input to their brain. They had aircon on at this like constant low-level noise, so they couldn't really hear anything. And they had to wear cotton gloves, so they couldn't sort of touch anything. And they just had to stay there, and that was it. And they could leave at any time that they wanted to, and they just had to stay. And every day that they stayed, they were paid $20. Right? That's just sort of a pretty simple experiment setup. How long do you want to guess how long people lasted for $20 a day? In today's money, we're talking about $300.
$300 a day.
Which is, I mean, it's not a fortune, but it's a motivator, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a student.
Oh man, well see, okay, it's hard for me to guess what a normal person would do because I have done isolation.
Oh yeah.
In that same Minefield episode where we made people bored and got them to shock themselves, I put myself in a room where the lights never turned off and there was constant noise and my food was just all pre-made shakes and I couldn't leave for 3 days.
How was it?
And it was, the way I put it is that I have like no memories of it happening really. But it feels like it lasted like a split second in my memory, and yet while I was there, it felt like there was no time. I mean, the lights didn't even go off. I didn't know what time it was, and 3 days is a long time, and that was so weird and uncomfortable, especially at first, that even if you were paying me $300 a day, it wasn't worth it. Now, I was able to do it because it was my job. It was important for the show, and there were like a dozen jobs that depended on me doing this.
You had purpose.
And I didn't have anything else I could be doing. It wasn't like, oh man, I could be, organizing my garage or whatever. So that made it feel meaningful. And so I got through it. But if it was just an elective voluntary study for $300 a day, I don't think people could do it for like a week. I think they'd eventually say, no, I'd rather not have $300 today.
You are absolutely right. So incredibly very similar to your timescale. So most people lasted about 2.5 days. So got out before 3. No one made it past 6. No one made it to a week.
I want to meet the person who went 6 days.
I know. They're probably like 100 now.
Yeah, I want to know what their personality is. They stuck it out. What a warrior.
What a warrior. And the thing is that like, okay, so in the beginning they were bored. They would sing songs, they would do mental arithmetic, they would recite poetry, whatever it was. But really soon their minds actually started to fracture under this monotony. And when you deprive the brain of stimulation, when you deprive it of its opportunity to make predictions, it starts predicting things that aren't really there. So essentially hallucinations start to creep in. So one of the participants saw this parade of squirrels marching in uniform past him. Another one saw a flying dog. Lots of them saw sort of faces, geometrical shapes that appeared, that felt really vivid. Now, the people who did this experiment, Heb was the scientist, they were really concerned by this. They were like, oh gosh, we thought this was just a cute little study and all of a sudden it's gone really dark. So he stopped the work, but the military were like, there's potential here that deprivation could really destabilize a person's sense of self like incredibly quickly. And so intelligence agencies on both sides of the Atlantic, including the CIA's MK Ultra program. I don't know if you've come across this, but that is a wild story, which you can hear about on The Rest is Classified. We'll put a link in the description of this. And I don't know whether that matches with your experience. I mean, did it feel like that? Did you feel like you were fragmenting your sense of self?
Yeah. So let me tell you. Okay, so the room was completely white. There were no books. There was nothing to do. At one point, I balled up my socks and I was throwing them against the wall. And I said, no, I got to stop because this is a game. This is stimulation. I just want to stare at the wall for 3 days. And I did. And the way you've put it as a kind of prediction engine gone wild is a great way to describe it, because I knew they weren't real at first. I started to remember the way things tended to go when I was a kid in class. And so it was like a memory. It was like I was remembering an event or like a scene in a movie, and it would be a teacher, my 5th grade teacher, talking to us, and then suddenly like that one kid who always had a smart aleck thing to say would say something, and then that girl would say something, and this was happening in my head, like voices in my head. I knew it wasn't real, but it was like my brain was rehearsing some of its prediction engines that it had had for decades. And it was kind of amusing. It got scary when I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And that was, I think, after about 2.5 days, especially dreams. Dreams were the first things that I couldn't differentiate from reality. And so I would dream. I dreamt that the experiment was over and that the producers had come in and my wife was there. And then I woke up and it just felt like they'd walked out. And so I thought, why am I here alone? And I opened the door, thinking it was over. They were just in here. But it was dark. And I just went back into the room and thought, I don't think the experiment's over, but I can't tell. The only hope I had that kept me going was knowing that they were not going to leave me in there for more than 72 hours because we rented the space for 3 days. And the last thing the production company was going to do was waste money. And so their financial incentive was all I had to keep me in that room. Otherwise, I would have said, I don't know what's going on. I might be here forever.
This is so extraordinary.
And so I don't want to get into it, but it's really encouraged me to think about the emergence of consciousness and sentience in humans, and the ancient stories of hearing voices and having prophetic dreams. I think it really is a deep thing that we can all tap into. And so I would recommend that everyone try some form of intense, prolonged isolation, because you learn so much about yourself when there's nothing else but your own mind around you.
Because this is the idea behind sensory deprivation tanks, isn't it? I mean, there was, I feel like this is about the 7th time that I've mentioned Feynman on this show. We should do an episode on Feynman and what a problematic character he was. But he really loved going in sensory deprivation tanks, which I've never managed to try, for exactly this reason, that essentially your brain very, very, very quickly starts to hallucinate. And he felt that he could explore the boundaries of what the sort of mechanics of his brain was doing, but in a way that didn't involve taking hallucinogens or mind-altering drugs that might have a longer lasting, more permanent effect.
That's right. Yeah, the therapeutic and the psychonautical powers of isolation can be explored with sensory deprivation tanks. And I did one of those too in preparation to the isolation room, and it helped a lot. A sensory deprivation tank is built to deprive you of any sensory information. You float in water saturated with Epsom salts. So you are neutrally buoyant, and you don't sink, you don't have to swim, you're just there. And the water is at just the right temperature to be in equilibrium with the heat your body releases, so you feel no temperature. You're also sealed in a chamber that's completely dark and completely soundproof. So there's just nothing coming in any of your holes. You're just there with nothing but your own thoughts to happen. And you can do it for 30 minutes at a time, an hour, many hours, but that allowed me to become more comfortable being alone with just my thoughts to entertain me. And that really made isolation, or at least the first day of it, much easier.
How many times did you do the deprivation tank?
Just once.
How quickly did you start to see things that weren't necessarily there?
Really quickly, because it feels like there's images in front of your eyes right away. And I want to make it clear that it's a hallucination, but it's not like you think it's actually there, right? I didn't think, oh my gosh, like these dancing colors and these lines are actually real. I knew they weren't. I was fascinated by why my brain was making them. And if I concentrated too much on them, they went away. It was not as powerful as I would have liked, right? It wasn't like a psychoactive drug, but it was much safer.
But here's the thing, it's like, I mean, this isn't, the same as having a mental health episode. This isn't, like you say, psychoactive drugs, which is where the molecules in your brain are sort of rearranging and you can't tell what's real anymore. This is also not that boredom drives people mad. It's that your brain needs noise in order to stay sane.
Yeah, it doesn't drive you mad. You are already mad, and it's reality around us that keeps us sane. And when you remove that, the brain goes, I'm on my own. This is what I'm really like. And you learn a lot about yourself. And so killing someone with boredom it almost feels like the opposite is what's going to really happen. You will make the person become born again as their true self.
Well, I think that there are limits to this, though, right? Because those experiments about, sensory deprivation from the 1950s, there are more extreme versions of this, of course, because there are prisoners who are held in long-term solitary confinement. So in 1983, there was a psychiatrist, Stuart Gracian, who went and conducted some clinical interviews with 14 different inmates who had been held in these really small, bare cells, like sort of 8 by 10 feet, not these, you can't sort of exercise in them, for example. Almost no human contact. Meals are passed through a slot in the door. The lights are on around the clock, very similar to the environment that you found yourself in. No conversation, no books, no radio, and no sensory inputs, basically. I mean, they could occasionally hear the clank of metal doors down the corridor and like occasionally people screaming or whatever, but that was it. And sometimes these people have been in there for years at a time. And I think that this is it. It's like, your experience of 3 days, how quickly your grip on reality was shifting. But that was a situation where you had purpose, you had an ending, you didn't have hopelessness. That was just that nothing new was happening and everything was fully expected. Whereas this is sort of a much more extreme version for a much longer period of time. And what they found was that, okay, yes, of course, these people had hallucinations, they had paranoia, they had panic, they had all of these different kind of things. One person said, I feel like I'm dissolving, which is like a really horrifying thought. But actually, in particular, when they looked at the brains of people in this experiment and in subsequent studies of people who have been subjected to long-term solitary confinement, we now know that it shrinks the hippocampus, that it reduces the activity in the prefrontal cortex, that once you deprive your brain of noise and stimulation, it actually starts to atrophy.
Yeah, and so maybe you cannot kill someone with boredom directly, but indirectly you can cause a lot of harm. And I don't know, maybe you can indirectly kill someone with boredom, because there have been studies on civil servants who reported being very bored at their jobs. When they were studied for a long time, it was found that they did die younger. Now, the direction of causation isn't really known here. Could it be that they were already going to die sooner and that led them to have more experiences of boredom for some related reason? Or was the boredom itself just reason for their brains to atrophy, give up?
Yeah, but I mean, when you put all of the different pieces together, it does definitely sound as though a sort of rich, interesting, like varied environment is the thing that our brains are not just sort of designed for, but also craving and actively seeking out all of the time.
Okay, so maybe the answer to my original question, how do you directly kill someone with boredom, is that you can't. Except you can extinct a species with boredom.
Go on.
I think humans are here, and I think a lot of other warm-blooded and mammalian animals are here because we get bored and we look at the universe and we say, all right, but what else could there be? This is the way everything is, but what if it wasn't this way? And that's how humans decided, okay, look, it's too cold here, but maybe I could play around with some of these fibers. Maybe I could play around with the part of this animal I can't digest and invent shirts and coats, and now I can live here. It was boredom that drove those innovations that allowed us to live everywhere. Alligators can't do that, and they don't do it, and they won't do it.
Because they're not driven by boredom to find something else.
That's right.
Hey, maybe boredom isn't the death of us. Maybe it's the birth of us. Maybe it's the whole reason why we're so successful. So in that case, then, it shouldn't be bored to death. It should be bored to being alive and successful.
It's not being bored to death. It's being bored to being alive.
Yeah, or maybe born to be bored.
Born to be bored.
Born to be bored. I'm putting in an order right now for the t-shirt that you're inevitably going to bring out.
Good. Yeah, you'll get the first one. Schopenhauer thought this was really curious. He thought, shouldn't the world be enough? The existence of boredom showed that there was something wrong with being, with existence itself, that we can't just be okay with it. And this bothered him his whole life. And on the other side, other philosophers said that it was a sign that humans were sublime. The fact that a grasshopper can just do nothing and not seemingly be worried about it, and yet we do, shows that we must be greater than this world, that we're above and beyond it. And I think the answer is somewhere in between. I think humans and a lot of any kind of warm-blooded animal, it really needs to solve puzzles. Its cognitive niche requires it to be thinking about things not as they are, but what they could be. I need to build a nest. Okay, that's an instinctive behavior, but I need to go somewhere else because it's getting too cold for me. So we're gonna try some other places. We're gonna build a ship and go across the ocean, not because we have to, but because we haven't gone there yet. I think that this is why species like ours are here today. I think it's why the dinosaurs didn't survive the asteroid impact, but birds and mammals did.
Don't you also think that this is a little bit why science is like the most human thing possible? Because it's like the extension of exactly what you're describing, right? Like if our brains are constantly trying to make predictions and then think about what might happen next and then going and testing our theories and like constantly wanting more and more and more and not being comfortable with just existing. I sort of feel like that is a description of exactly what science is too. Like constantly trying to work out what's just around the next corner, that next bit of discovery, that next prediction.
That's right, yeah. And philosophy as well, like just continuing to ask questions for no purpose. Have I told you one of my favorite jokes? I think about this joke the most often.
Go on.
Okay, so in the joke, the dean of a university is speaking to the engineering department, and he's like, guys, you're costing us too much money. Why can't you be like the math department? All they need is paper and pencils and waste paper baskets. Actually, no, why can't you be like the philosophy department? All they need is paper and pencils. And so even if bad ideas are allowed, that's a hallmark feature of humanity, that you don't have that activity when you're a tree.
No, you don't. You just end up in the waste paper basket.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why we're here and you're in the waste paper basket. Okay, well, I think that is a very lovely place to wrap up this episode. We hope that you enjoyed that. There is a lot more to come from us. Make sure that you are following The Rest of Science wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you like and subscribe on YouTube. Hello, welcome to The Rest of Science with me, Hannah Fry.
And I am Michael Stevens.
Question for you, Michael. What are we made of?
We're all made of stars.
Yeah.
Or are we? As you can tell by my sarcastic tone, I'm not a big fan of that phrase. It gets spoken a lot, but today I want us to really answer the question, what are we made of?
You don't like the explanation that we're forged in the heart of dying intergalactic
Oh, it's so
collisions?
inspiring. Oh my gosh.
Spewed out by supernovae explosions.
I mean,
no?
obviously we are. We were.
Okay, but wait, when you say obviously, why so obviously?
Oh, well, because we're made of matter, and that matter wasn't created by our mothers in the womb, ex nihilo, okay, from nothing. It was already there, and it was rearranged into us, and before we were here, it was something else.
Because the atoms come from elsewhere.
The atoms came from elsewhere, and then you ask, well, where do the atoms come from? And they formed early in the universe, and then heavier and heavier nuclei, more and more elements were formed by stars, smashing them together in their cores, and then dying and exploding, and all of their guts coalescing into new stars and planets and people. So we're made of stars, mostly.
I guess the point is that it's very rare that new atoms get made on Earth. We don't have like a little atom factory where it's like, how many carbons do you want? How many oxygen do you want? These atoms only exist because of these high energy explosions that happened in intergalactic collisions.
It depends what you mean by made.
Go on.
Okay, so there are a lot of radioactive isotopes of very common things like potassium and carbon that are always like converting and decaying into things.
I don't think I'm not counting decay. I'm not counting
Okay.
decay. I want what's the opposite of decay? Up-K.
Decay, recay, or just K.
K.
You can decay. Can you just K?
I only want K.
Yeah, I mean, I can't go to the store and say, oh, I need carbon. I'm looking to, grow.
Build a baby.
Yeah, it's like if you want carbon, go eat a potato. But that potato got the carbon from the soil, which got it from a star that died billions of years ago.
Mm-hmm. So hang on, this all sounds completely legitimate to me.
It does, and that's why I say mostly we are made of stars.
Yeah.
I like to say that we are made by stars.
Go on. This episode is brought to you by Cancer Research UK.
Imagine this. Inside all of us, billions of cells follow millions of instructions written in microscopic code. And when a new cell grows, it copies those instructions, but the smallest error can lead cancer to develop.
Right, and this is the reason why there isn't a single cure for cancer, because there are more than 200 different types. Each of them have got different distinct characteristics, different challenges, different mysteries. And that means that trying to cure cancer isn't like following a single path. It's like trying to map out an entire forest.
That's right. And Cancer Research UK is the world's largest charitable funder of cancer research. I mean, their work spans more than 20 countries, with over 4,000 scientists, doctors, and nurses pushing knowledge forward to save and improve lives worldwide.
Over the last 50 years, the work that this charity has done has helped to double cancer survival in the UK. And you have to think about that is more parents at the dinner table, right? That is more friends at their birthday parties. That is more people who are living longer, better lives.
For more information about Cancer Research UK, their research, breakthroughs, and how you can support them, visit cancerresearchuk.org/Rest of Science. First of all, the very lightest elements, hydrogen. Okay, there's a lot of hydrogen in our bodies.
Sure.
It's part of H2O.
See episode 1.
See episode 1, yeah. As the universe cooled, protons could start to hold on to electrons, and you've got hydrogen. So a lot of the hydrogen in your body wasn't made by a star. It was just made in the very early days, even before stars existed.
Feels a bit pedantic, but go on.
How is that pedantic? There's an enormous amount of hydrogen in your body.
Excuse me, actually, you were made before stars.
Now, okay, to be fair, that hydrogen was probably in a star before it was in you.
Sure.
It wasn't made. Well, okay, so you're made. Yeah. All right, fine. That one I'll give you.
Okay, deal.
You're made of stars there. My knockdown point is boron and beryllium.
Go on.
Hydrogen to helium to lithium. But then in nucleosynthesis, the process inside stars that forms new elements, you leapfrog all the way from number 3, lithium, to number 6, carbon. And 4 and 5, beryllium and boron, are not made in stars.
Well, where are they made then?
They are made by cosmic ray spallation.
I beg your pardon.
So this is where I get the whole, we're not made of stars, we're made by stars, because cosmic rays often come from stars. We're not entirely sure everything that they might come from, but they are extremely high energy particles. They're not rays of a laser or something. They're little cannonballs, and they're flying through space, often from stars that supernovaed many, many years ago. When these hit other atoms, they can cause that atom to explode. They can cause things like neutrons to fly around, and then those things fall into other atoms, and that is how beryllium and boron get made.
So hold on.
Not in a star, but around a star, or potentially really far away from a star.
By a star. So right at the beginning we said, what are you made of? Stardust. And you disagreed. And to prove that you're not a pedant, we've gone all the way around the houses and come back to you saying, we're not made of stars, we're made by stars.
But we're made by stars of stuff.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Mike. You're not pedantic at all. Hang on. Right. How much boron and beryllium is there in the human body, though?
I've known this my entire life. So your body contains about 35 micrograms of beryllium.
Okay.
And every day you drink about between 0.2 and 0.6 milligrams of boron in your drinking water. Now, earlier I told you that boron had no...
You're really adding to this pedantic thing here. Okay, you have to say by stars, but because 0.35 micrograms of beryllium is in your body.
We said, what are you made of? Not what is most of you made of. I just think, here's the deal. I'm not being pedantic so much as I love that I get to have this conversation every time someone says, oh, we're made of stars. I can be like, well, boron and beryllium are technically in your body and they're made by cosmic ray spallation. So, all right, I do that all the time. And there's not
this is
much.
why we love you, Michael.
If you support me, eat some kidney beans, eat some avocado and kidney beans and wash it down with prune juice. Those are our highest dietary sources of boron and beryllium.
Or just chew on a boron rod.
That's what my dad always used to tell me. But guys, let's talk about the things that make us, not just what they make us out of.
Cosmic rays. Because actually, cosmic rays, there is a whole fascinating journey that we're going to take you on in this episode about cosmic rays that bring us to life itself, but also a cosmic ray helped a Super Mario speedrunner achieve the impossible.
Yeah.
I guess we should start off talking about what cosmic rays are. I mean, you describe them as star puke, which I think is, I mean, frankly, that's all we need, isn't it?
It's more than puke. It's better than puke.
It's more violent than puke.
It's the entrails of a star
Yeah.
in many cases.
I mean, because here's the thing. Okay, space is sort of, it feels like it's more like lots of blackness, but actually space is extremely violent. There are, dying stars that explode into supernovae. There are sort of stars that are tearing themselves apart in these explosions that are so big that they can outshine actual galaxies. I mean, you also have like black holes smashing into one another. You've got like actual galaxies smashing into each other. It's all sorts of stuff. It's throwing debris all over the place across space.
And that debris are the cosmic rays.
Exactly.
A cosmic ray is not a immaterial flash of light like a ray, from a laser gun in a movie. It's just really, really high energy, fast moving particles like protons and helium nuclei and stuff.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff, the debris that's throwing around is going to be planet-sized or moon-sized or, just like big rocks. But tons of it, a lot of it is the size of single atoms or single, atomic particles, basically.
That's right. And these things are not just like rare. They are flooding the universe. I mean, how many times am I being hit by a cosmic ray every day?
Even now, okay,
in this moment.
A lot. So the calculations are that every square meter at sea level, sort of at sea level-ish here, gets 10,000 of these space bullets every second.
Every second,
right? It's an enormous number. I mean, it's sort of like imagine that the Earth is kind of sitting in a bar during a sort of Western-style shootout, right? There's the stuff flying everywhere, and we are actually protected from a lot of it because of our atmosphere, because of the magnetic field that the Earth creates, kind of protects us from a lot of this stuff. But still, that it's this constant barrage.
And we don't feel it at all.
No.
Mostly they pass right through us, I'm sure.
Well, okay, so it depends, right? These protons are like heading straight towards Earth. And of course, there's a lot of atmosphere between us and sort of outer space. Just by chance, at some point, this proton is going to smash into a particle that gets directly in its way. And at that moment, they don't just bounce off each other, right? You can't just think of them as sort of like normal bullets, okay? You end up with this fireworks display of loads of different types of subatomic particles. So you get quarks, you get gluons, and then they go on to sort of combine and then split into all these other particles. You get mesons, you get muons, you get neutrinos, you get photons, a little flash of light, you get hadrons. And loads of these just decay away almost instantly, apart from muons, which is sort of like, it's kind of like a heavy electron, and those survive just long enough to hit down at sea level, to come down to Earth.
But they shouldn't.
They shouldn't.
They decay so quickly that even at the speeds they travel, they shouldn't reach the surface of the Earth, and yet we detect them. Okay, they're being created as shrapnel from cosmic ray collisions in the atmosphere, and we detect them down here on the surface. And yet that became some of the earliest evidence that Einstein was right, that the faster you go, the slower time passes for you. These particles were decaying exactly when they should. It's just that time was running so slowly for them compared to our time that their brief lives allowed them to travel all the way to Earth's surface.
Exactly. So these things, they decay extremely quickly. They last for 2.2 microseconds, right? I mean, less than a blink of an eye. But even if they were traveling at the speed of light, 2.2 microseconds only lets them travel about 660 meters. Which is really not far at all. And yet the atmosphere is like 15,000 meters thick, 15 kilometers up in the sky. So if classical physics were right, you would never find any muons down at the ground from cosmic rays. And yet, exactly as you say, you measure them, and there are thousands per square meter.
Wow. So we live constantly in a shower of cosmic rays and the residue of cosmic ray spallation. That stuff's called spall, which is what you basically call shrapnel when it's not a weapon. It's just stuff that flies out, some of which are these time-traveling particles or time-dilating particles.
You can see them though, can't you? You can make like cloud chambers to detect them.
Yep.
Didn't you make one of those when you were a kid?
I did. My Mother somehow allowed me to get a bubble chamber from this catalog, and it came with the chamber, but it also came with a needle tipped with radioactive lead. And she made me keep that in the garage. I don't know how she approved all of this.
Sorry, your mother, who didn't let you say crap or damn,
Until I was in my 30s.
allowed you to get a radioactive lead needle?
First of all, I still can't say damn.
Okay, sorry.
I am allowed to now say crap and piss.
Woo!
Piss seems a lot worse than damn, I gotta tell you. But anyway, I don't think she fully understood what it was. And then when it came in this special test tube with radioactive warnings all over it, she was like, oh. And then I told her, oh, so I also need you to take me to the store to get some dry ice and the highest proof alcohol you can buy.
Because, hold on, we should explain what these things are. You basically get, imagine sort of an unused aquarium that you might house a fish in, right? Sort of that kind of thing. And then you create a layer of alcohol vapor, sort of really, really chill it using dry ice to create this layer of alcohol.
A supercritical layer that's just ready to condense. It just needs the littlest provocation, and it can get that from cosmic rays.
A little muon.
A little muon flies through, and then you see a trail.
Like a contrail almost.
A contrail from an airplane, basically. You see that, and it's this quick streak of slightly whiter, a very thin, like a spider silk. And that is radiation from above.
Hold on, what was this radioactive needle for?
Oh, well, you needed a source of radiation because background radiation is not enough to get cool results in the bubble chamber. That I bought. It was a very simple one. But you could stick this needle through a little hole in the chamber, and then you would see it looks like wisps of hair constantly coming off of the needle. It was lead. It was a lead isotope that was radioactive.
Where is it now?
I don't know.
Just out there giving someone else cancer.
I should ask her what happened to it, because it sat in the garage, but she sold that house years ago.
Oh, gosh.
So it could still be in that garage.
Maybe we should go and check in on the people who...
Maybe she ate it. I'll give her a call after we record, but yeah.
If she suddenly gets extra senses, can like climb buildings.
She can thank me.
Shoot spider webs out of her arms, That's how you detect muons, right? Using cloud chambers. You can also do it where you get great big tanks of water and look for little flashes of UV light. You can also do this on the atmosphere where you kind of have loads and loads of mirrors and just wait for that head-on collision of a cosmic ray and some sort of particle in the atmosphere. And when you do that, based on the intensity of the light, you can tell how much energy that space bullet had, right? That sort of piece of shrapnel had. And loads of them, most of them, have low energy, right? So 10 to 80% the speed of light. The slow guys.
Yeah, so slow.
Not really bothering. And so...
Good job there. We need a base of operations on the other side of the river. And that means we need a bridge. I don't suppose you've built a bridge before, right? Well, there's a first for everything. Oh, and if you want a steady supply of concrete slabs, I have just the thing. You can send a concrete slab convoy from the warehouse to the harbor base. Not essential, but it should keep our reserves up.
Vocês estão parensando de chalaceiro. Ça devrait dans le ciel.
should weather any storm. Remember, our job isn't just to fix what's broken. It's to make life better for folks around here.
Solar flares and big ejections from the sun, they'll spit out these sort of protons that they make life quite interesting for astronauts, to be fair.
Wait, in what way?
Oh, because if you are orbiting the Earth, if you're like in the International Space Station, so you're outside of the protective layer of Earth, these cosmic rays are coming in and not hitting other particles before they decay and reach you. Astronauts, when they're on the ISS, report seeing flashes of light. The cosmic ray interacts with the neurons in their brain and make them think they're seeing things that are not there or tasting things that are not there.
No kidding.
Like flashes of metallic taste. Just like this sort of interruption.
Yeah, so that would be a concern for long-distance space travelers. If you want to go all the way to Mars, you're really leaving the protection of Earth, and you're going to be hit by cosmic rays directly a lot.
But these are the low energy ones that we're talking about. So every now and then you get a medium energy one, 99.9% speed of light.
Jeez.
Right? Those are coming from supernovae, they're coming from pulsars, that kind of thing. But then in 1991 in Utah, they had all of these mirrors in the sky, pointing in the sky, doing this big experiment, looking for cosmic rays, trying to catch this very faint flash of ultraviolet light that happens when they slam into the atmosphere. And they found one, they recorded one that was travelling out 99.99999. I'm going to carry on going. It's 21 nines, right? 21% the speed of light. Yeah. 99.99999. 21 of them, 5%.
Are you describing the oh my god part?
I am describing. This is what it became known as.
It wasn't going the speed of light. But to put it in perspective, at the speed it was traveling, if it entered a race with a beam of light, after 250,000 years, the light would only be 1 centimeter ahead of it.
What?
It's basically moving at light speed. And it hit Earth and we detected it. And we called it the oh my god particle. Most of them aren't that fast.
No, but I mean, this one, the amount of energy that this had to get a particle to be traveling at that sort of a speed. This one, it basically had the same energy as a baseball traveling at 100 kilometers per hour. Right, but it was in a single particle.
In a single
particle.
Subatomic particle.
And this is it. No one still has any idea what kind of violent collision would produce that kind of space shrapnel. I mean, it's a real, genuine mystery. And it's not the only one. They've seen other particles with similar amounts of energy.
Do they know the general region the oh my god particle came from in the sky?
I don't think they do, not from a single particle. You can only really, you can tell when there's a lot that come from a particular direction. But also remember, I mean, these things might be traveling close to the speed of light, but they've probably been traveling for billions of years. Like what you are seeing.
In our time. In their time, it's no time's passed almost.
Sure.
Yeah.
But in our time, it's billions of years. And, quite often these things they're sort of like the ghostly remnants of ancient star collisions. Older than the sun, and these bullets like passing through you all the time.
Imagine being that particle. You formed in the early days of the universe, and then you traveled and you watched in very fast motion the universe age, and you traveled a long distance, and eventually you wound up on the one planet that could detect you and talk about you on a podcast. What a life.
What a life. What a life.
I know more about the third most powerful cosmic ray detected, the Amaterasu particle. This one was detected just in 2021. It had the energy of a brick being dropped from your waist onto the ground.
In a single particle.
In a single particle. But what's cool is that we tracked where it came from, and it came from the local void, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a nearby area, well, nearby. It's far out from our galaxy and all the galaxies around us where there's just nothing. There's nothing there. And yet it's pitching these cannonballs at us, or one cannonball. We don't know where it came from. It could be just a property of space itself, is the creation of these particles.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Because also, I mean, think about how small Earth is. There could be something going on in the deep void that we don't know about. They're spewing out all of these in all sorts of different directions. And we just so happen to have been looking in the right place at one moment where one just so happened to be passing.
I'm sure even more powerful particles have hit Earth, but we're not always looking. Now, we've only been talking about particles that scientists have detected with experiments watching for them, but I think that we've also been affected by massive cosmic ray, high-energy particles doing really interesting things when we weren't even expecting them. For example, in 2016, there was this woman named Mary Moe, great name by the way. She was on a flight to Amsterdam, and she had a pacemaker. And suddenly, in the middle of the flight, her heart just starts beating like crazy. Like she can see it beating, and the rhythm is all off. They do this whole emergency ambulance pickup when they land. At the hospital, they determined that the pacemaker had entered its backup processing mode, where it has like a default rate and impulse strength. It was not what was prescribed for her. Why did that happen? The leading explanation is that a single bit in the computer of that pacemaker was flipped. Okay, the memory and the language of a computer is stored in these electrically charged bits, and a charged particle that results from a cosmic ray collision in our atmosphere can interfere with these bits and flip them. They can only be one of two things, on or off, 1 or 0. If you flip one of them, that might have been enough to cause the pacemaker to go problem, resort back to default processing mode, and that's probably what happened.
Change a 1 to a 0, and these are potentially the consequences of it.
So far we've been talking about cosmic ray particles that have been detected by scientists using experiments that were watching for them, but we have evidence of high-energy cosmic rays doing really interesting things when we weren't even expecting them.
Actually, when you consider how much electronic equipment there is, I mean, in the sky, in planes, for example, the fact that this can happen, the fact that a cosmic ray can interact with electronic equipment, change a 1 to a 0 or a 0 to a 1, sometimes it can have these really catastrophic consequences. So Mary pacemaker being one. There was a Qantas flight. This is in 2008, and the plane's kind of going in the sky, all happy, and then twice in 10 minutes it does a nosedive. Right, lots of people end up getting injured on board. Just a really sharp turn. And when they did this investigation, they found that there was this erroneous computer data going on in the onboard systems that misrepresented the angle at which the aircraft was flying. So you can imagine, actually, a 1 to a 0 or a 0 to a 1 in that situation would make a huge difference. If you're at there's quite a big difference between 5-degree angle and 15 degrees, or minus 15 degrees or whatever it might be. A lot of people, the explanation that people think is that it was cosmic radiation, that a particle from outer space, from some intergalactic collision billions of years ago, traveled across the galaxies and interacted with that computer at precisely the right moment, precisely the right way, in order to confuse the onboard systems.
Not frightening at all.
Not frightening at all.
It's not just planes that are affected, though. And after the break, I want to talk about how it could be affecting your gaming.
The most serious use case of all.
Pacemakers, crashing airplanes.
All right, before the break, we were terrifying everybody, whoever wants to get in a plane again. What we should add is that there are now systems in place, error-correcting codes, that account for this. You don't really have computer systems in an airplane anymore that are just solely responsible for the angle of
Should
the
I do
aircraft.
nosedive or not? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's we've moved on a little bit from there.
Good.
You're kind of safe. But before we get on to the gaming story, which is extremely serious, I do want to add in the fact that those examples, so the Qantas flight and Mary Mo, happened at high altitudes. I think it's probably not a coincidence, because of course you are more likely to interact with these particles the higher up you go. And actually this is the reason why we know that these things exist in the first place. So back in 1900 or so, this is the point, people knew about atoms, they knew about radiation, they knew how to detect it. But everyone thought that the radiation that they were detecting, this sort of background level, was probably coming from the sun.
Sure.
The sun was spitting out of this stuff. And then there was a guy called Victor Hess, 1912 this is, and he was like, I know exactly how to test this. I know exactly how to work out whether this is coming from the sun. Why don't I get into a balloon filled with hydrogen, go up into the sky, and measure how much radiation there is up there? And by the way, why don't I do this during a solar eclipse?
Perfect, yeah.
Because then, when it's dark and I'm in my, 5 kilometers high in my...
Bienvenidos a un viaje que nos llevará mucho más allá de la historia escrita, mucho más atrás de los grandes imperios y reyes que solemos escuchar. Hoy recorreremos toda la prehistoria, el inmenso periodo que precede a la invención de la escritura y que abarca cientos de miles de años de evolución, de luchas, de descubrimientos y de cambios que definieron lo que somos hoy. En este vídeo exploraremos cómo aparecieron los primeros homínidos, cómo evolucionaron nuestras especies, las formas de vida que llevaron, las herramientas que inventaron, los cambios climáticos que enfrentaron y cómo, poco a poco, se fue construyendo la base de lo que más tarde sería la civilización. Quédate hasta el final, porque descubrirás desde el surgimiento del género Homo hasta el inicio de la Edad de los Metales, pasando por los secretos del Paleolítico, el arte rupestre, la revolución neolítica y los primeros pasos hacia la sociedad organizada. La prehistoria se divide en grandes etapas: el Paleolítico, el Mesolítico, el Neolítico y la Edad de los Metales. Cada una representa transformaciones enormes en el modo en que nuestros antepasados sobrevivieron, cazaron, se alimentaron, construyeron refugios, desarrollaron la espiritualidad y comenzaron a dejar huellas materiales que todavía nos asombran. Lo interesante es que no todo fue una línea recta. Hubo avances, retrocesos, extinciones y adaptaciones sorprendentes. Comencemos desde el principio. Para entender la prehistoria, debemos remontarnos a millones de años atrás, a los primeros homínidos que comenzaron a caminar erguidos en África. Nuestro linaje, el de los homínidos bípedos, se diferenció de otros primates hace alrededor de 6 a 7 millones de años. De ahí surgieron diferentes especies, algunas extintas, otras que dejaron descendencia. Entre ellas, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus y, mucho después, Homo sapiens. Cada uno aportó algo único a la historia. Unos fueron los primeros en usar herramientas, otros en dominar el fuego, y nosotros en desarrollar el lenguaje complejo y la cultura simbólica. Pero no corramos tan rápido. La prehistoria no es un simple prólogo, es una epopeya. Cada hueso fósil hallado, cada piedra tallada, cada pintura en la roca, nos habla de seres humanos que enfrentaron un mundo salvaje y supieron adaptarse. Y ese es el viaje que emprendemos ahora. El relato comienza con los primeros pasos de los Australopithecus, un género que apareció hace unos 4 millones de años en África Oriental. Eran bípedos, caminaban erguidos, aunque todavía conservaban características propias de los primates, como brazos largos y cráneos pequeños. Uno de los fósiles más famosos es Lucy, un Australopithecus afarensis descubierto en Etiopía. Gracias a ello sabemos que la bipedestación fue un cambio decisivo. Liberó las manos para manipular objetos, transportar alimento y eventualmente fabricar herramientas. Más adelante surgió el Homo habilis, hace unos 2,4 millones de años. El nombre significa hombre hábil porque fue el primero en asociarse de manera clara con la creación de herramientas de piedra. Con simples cantos tallados, comenzaron a cortar carne, romper huesos para extraer médula y defenderse de depredadores. Este paso marcó un antes y un después, pues la capacidad tecnológica permitió ampliar la dieta y, con ello, el desarrollo cerebral. Su cerebro era mayor que el de los australopitecos, alcanzando los 600 a 700 centímetros cúbicos. Tiempo después apareció Homo erectus, una de las especies más exitosas de toda la prehistoria. Vivió hace casi 2 millones de años y se extendió desde África hacia Europa y Asia. Su nombre, erecto, hace referencia a su postura erguida completa, pero lo que realmente lo distingue es que fue el primero en dominar el fuego. El fuego transformó la vida, permitió cocinar alimentos, lo que los hizo más digeribles y nutritivos, espantó a los animales peligrosos, brindó calor en climas fríos y alargó las jornadas gracias a la luz nocturna. El fuego, en manos del Homo erectus, fue literalmente la chispa de la cultura humana. También fueron grandes migrantes. Se cree que fueron los primeros en salir de África de manera definitiva, estableciéndose en lugares tan lejanos como Indonesia y China. Su capacidad para adaptarse a distintos ambientes los convirtió en auténticos pioneros de la expansión humana. Y con ellos, la humanidad dejó de ser exclusivamente africana para convertirse en un género que habitaba varias regiones del planeta. Mientras Homo erectus prosperaba en distintos continentes, otras especies de nuestro linaje comenzaron a aparecer. Entre ellas destaca el Homo heidelbergensis, que vivió hace unos 700.000 años. Con un cerebro cercano a los 1200 centímetros cúbicos, fueron cazadores expertos y probablemente los primeros en construir refugios más elaborados con ramas, piedras y pieles. Este grupo es especialmente importante porque del descendieron dos linajes distintos. En Europa dio origen a los neandertales y en África al Homo sapiens. Los neandertales, que habitaron principalmente Europa y el occidente de Asia desde hace unos 400.000 hasta hace apenas 40.000 años, fueron una especie robusta, de gran fuerza física y cráneos amplios. Se adaptaron a los climas fríos de las glaciaciones y desarrollaron técnicas de caza muy eficaces. No eran torpes ni primitivos como se pensó durante mucho tiempo. Fabricaban herramientas especializadas, dominaban el fuego y se vestían con pieles trabajadas. Incluso enterraban a sus muertos, lo que sugiere que tenían un sentido de la espiritualidad o de la vida después de la muerte. Al mismo tiempo, en África evolucionaba una especie distinta, el Homo sapiens, nosotros. Aparecimos hace unos 300.000 años y, con el tiempo, desarrollamos una capacidad única para el pensamiento abstracto y el lenguaje simbólico. Esto nos dio ventaja frente a otras especies humanas. Mientras los neandertales perfeccionaban su adaptación al frío, los sapiens diversificaban sus formas de vida, creando redes sociales más amplias y artefactos más variados. El encuentro entre sapiens y neandertales fue inevitable. Durante miles de años coexistieron en Europa y Asia, compartiendo territorios e incluso mezclándose. Hoy sabemos, gracias a la genética, que todos los humanos modernos de fuera de África llevamos en nuestro ADN un pequeño porcentaje de herencia neandertal. Esto significa que no solo compitieron, también convivieron e intercambiaron más de lo que se pensaba. Este mosaico de especies muestra que la prehistoria no fue la historia de una sola línea ascendente, sino una trama compleja en la que diferentes ramas humanas compartieron escenarios y dejaron huellas que aún llevamos dentro. Con el Homo sapiens ya presente en África, comenzó una de las migraciones más trascendentales de toda la historia, la expansión fuera de su continente natal. Hace alrededor de 70.000 años, pequeños grupos de sapiens emprendieron viajes hacia el Medio Oriente, desde donde se dispersaron hacia Asia, Oceanía y más tarde, Europa. Este fenómeno se conoce como la salida de África, y marcó el inicio de nuestra especie como un pueblo verdadero.
I might need to raise my standards so I don't get impressed so easily every time. Next on our agenda is the gas power plant and the steel pipes facility.
to us, such as apes or monkeys. Insects, in the eyes of many, are just drones, going about their short lives without much of a thought, if any, for themselves. But researchers at Queen Mary University of London think that bumblebees may be more conscious than we give them credit for. The team wanted to know whether the insects would do something, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to. They set up an experiment in which the bees could choose one of 3 paths towards a food reward. One path was a simple straight line, free of any obstacles, but on either side of this were paths strewn with a few small wooden balls. On one side they were stationary, and on the other they could move around. The only incentive to go via any other path than the one without obstacles was if the bees wanted to interact with the wooden balls. And, amazingly, every single bee in the experiment chose to do just that. They even appeared to play with them, rolling around on them like a child on an exercise ball. The behavior had no apparent use for the survival of the bees, so according to the researchers, there was only one logical explanation. They were having fun. And so, if they make decisions based on what they want, rather than on simple instinct or survival, could we say that a bumblebee is conscious? Consciousness has puzzled scientists and philosophers for thousands of years. Long the realm of philosophy, for much of human history, it has of course been practically impossible to see what a thought looked like. But in the 1920s, German physicist Hans Berger developed the electroencephalogram, the first tool that could record human brain activity without being invasive into the skull. Berger placed electrodes on his own son's head and used a new amplifier to convert the brain's electrical signals into visible traces on paper. We could, at long last, see the mind. This line of research would continue throughout the 20th century, when electrically stimulating epileptic patients' brains in the 1940s and 50s, Wilder Penfield and Herbert Jasper found they could create experiences such as light or sound, and even elicit the vivid recall of memories. This allowed them to begin to build maps of where the sensory side of consciousness is processed in the brain. These and other experiments like them provided pieces of the mind-body puzzle, linking aspects of consciousness to areas and processes in the brain. In the 1990s, Francis Crick, one of the discoverers of DNA, and his colleague Christoph Koch coined the term neural correlates of consciousness. They sought to further the search for consciousness and ask if it is a physical process, where are the neural correlates for this experience? Suppose you were to glance upon the majestic Victoria Falls of the Zambezi River. The neural correlates that are associated with that experience are the neurons that fire whenever a person observes, imagines, or dreams a waterfall. Thousands of these neurons can be active at the same time and in differing combinations, allowing for interaction between them. And so, the mainstream scientific consensus is that consciousness is an experience that is happening in the complex activities of neurons. But why do we have it? When did it evolve, and for what purpose? To try and answer this, we must look beyond the brain, to the outward behaviors of conscious beings. How far away from the human lineage can we cast our net and find consciousness? In the past, many had thought that only humans could be conscious. René Descartes suggested a separate physical body and thinking soul, and since animals didn't have souls, they couldn't be conscious. But more recent philosophy has re-examined this, and in 1974, the American philosopher Thomas Nagel asked, what is it like to be a bat? We as humans see the world through a uniquely human lens. Everything about our perspective of life is influenced by our experience of being human. From strictly biological factors like our eyesight and our sense of smell, to less tangible things like our capacity for strong emotions and our relationships with others. To know what it is like to be a human, therefore, is a question only a human knows the answer to. just as only bats know what it is like to be a bat. And so, if there is an experience that is like being a bat, then bats, logically, must on some level be conscious. As Thomas Nagel put it, an organism has conscious mental states if, and only if, there is something that it is like to be that organism. To Nagel, that something was a subjective experience, and any organism that has its own subjective experience of being itself is conscious. But is there experimental evidence to back up this idea? In studies by Lynn Snedden, trout injected with acid showed prolonged rubbing of the affected area, reduced feeding, and started antisocial behavior. When given painkillers, their behavior soon returned to normal. In zebrafish, injured individuals exhibited anxiety-like behavior and avoided locations associated with prior pain. Here, we can clearly see non-human species having a conscious experience, processed in the brain and shown outwardly in their behavior. Clearly, animals as alien to us as fish can learn to avoid pain, insects like bumblebees can play, and also, crabs can have favorites. Hermit crabs cannot grow shells of their own. Instead, they choose their shells from among those shared by other organisms, or even bits of plastic or litter found on the beach. And so, in a study by Barry McGee and Robert Elwood, hermit crabs were given small electric shocks to see how this would influence their behavior. Generally, they found that a couple of small shocks were enough to put a crab off its current shell and to make it leave in search of a new one where it wouldn't get shocked. So far, so predictable. But if a crab was in a shell that it particularly liked, it took considerably more electric shocks to convince it to leave. It took even more shocks to get the crabs to vacate their shells when the researchers introduced the scent of a predator into the water. On the one hand, they could leave and stop getting shocked, but risk being eaten by
Hubo una vez una tierra donde los hombres construyeron torres para alcanzar el cielo y escribieron historias destinadas a vencer al tiempo. Una región dominada por ríos poderosos que, en su furia y en su calma, dictaban la vida y la muerte de civilizaciones enteras. Esta tierra, situada entre el Tigris y el Éufrates, fue la cuna donde la humanidad se atrevió por primera vez a soñar en grande, a desafiar lo imposible y a sentar las bases del mundo moderno. Mesopotamia. Solo nombrarla evoca imágenes de ciudades legendarias como Babilonia, Uruk y Nínive, habitadas por héroes míticos y gobernadas por reyes cuya ambición no conocía límites. Aquí se inventó la escritura para vencer al olvido, las leyes para ordenar el caos, y la guerra para extender dominios. Aquí se edificaron imperios, y también se vio su caída dramática. Pero ¿qué sabemos realmente sobre esta región que cambió el curso de la historia? ¿Cómo logró Mesopotamia convertirse en la primera gran civilización? ¿Y por qué su legado sigue fascinándonos hoy? Desde sus orígenes misteriosos hasta su desaparición bajo la arena del desierto, exploraremos las luces y sombras de una tierra cuya influencia perdura. En este viaje épico no solo caminaremos por calles milenarias o subiremos las escaleras sagradas de sus templos monumentales. Iremos mucho más allá. Separaremos el mito de la realidad, la leyenda de la historia. Revelaremos cómo un puñado de seres humanos, en una tierra castigada por la sequía y las inundaciones, se atrevió a desafiar al destino y a forjar una civilización que resonaría en la eternidad. Prepárate para sumergirte en una historia que habla tanto del pasado como del presente. Una historia llena de hazañas increíbles y tragedias inevitables, de ambición humana y de dioses celosos. Bienvenidos a Mesopotamia, la tierra que cambió la historia para siempre. Desde las cimas nevadas de las montañas armenias, dos ríos poderosos nacen en silencio, serpenteando hacia el sur con la paciencia eterna de quien conoce su destino. Sus nombres resonarán por siempre en la historia humana. El Tigris y el Éufrates fluyen imparables, tallando valles, alimentando llanuras, otorgando vida y trayendo también muerte. Estos dos ríos, gemelos y rivales, enmarcan una región que el tiempo bautizaría con un nombre que evoca misterio y esplendor: Mesopotamia, la tierra entre ríos. Imagina por un momento esa llanura vasta y fértil, extendiéndose bajo cielos inmensos que parecen no tener fin. Una tierra de horizontes infinitos, bañada en oro por el sol de la mañana y cubierta por un manto de estrellas al caer la noche. Esta región del mundo, situada estratégicamente en el corazón de lo que ahora conocemos como Oriente Medio, estaba destinada a ser el escenario del nacimiento de la civilización humana. Pero la Mesopotamia antigua no era un paraíso fácil ni generoso sin condición. Era tierra que exigía obediencia y trabajo, una tierra que recompensaba la paciencia y castigaba la imprudencia. Sus ríos traían inundaciones periódicas que convertían llanuras polvorientas en campos abundantes, pero también podían desbordarse en riadas feroces, arrasando pueblos enteros y borrando en minutos el trabajo de generaciones. Los primeros pobladores de Mesopotamia llegaron atraídos por esa promesa ambigua, por esa tierra que ofrecía prosperidad a quien supiera domarla. Hombres y mujeres que, hace más de 7000 años, dejaron atrás la incertidumbre de la vida nómada para establecerse junto a esos dos grandes ríos. Construyeron pequeñas aldeas de barro, simples y humildes, pero con una visión extraordinaria. Sabían que aquel lugar guardaba la llave para su futuro, aunque desconocían aún la magnitud de lo que estaban creando. La clave de su supervivencia radicaba en dominar el agua. Para controlar la fuerza impredecible de los ríos, los primeros habitantes comenzaron a diseñar complejos sistemas de canales, diques y acequias. Esta lucha constante por el control del agua no solo les permitió sobrevivir, sino que los obligó a trabajar juntos. De la necesidad nació la cooperación. De la cooperación, la organización, y de la organización, las primeras sociedades complejas. Así, casi sin saberlo, aquellos primeros habitantes comenzaron a sentar las bases de lo que hoy llamamos civilización. Con el tiempo las aldeas se convirtieron en ciudades, y las ciudades dieron paso a reinos. La abundancia proporcionada por los ríos atrajo a más pobladores, lo que aumentó la necesidad de alimentos, protección y reglas claras. Surgieron líderes capaces de movilizar recursos y organizar comunidades enteras. Se construyeron las primeras murallas para protegerse de invasores, los primeros templos para honrar a dioses que controlaban inundaciones y sequías, y se creó la primera escritura para registrar lo esencial: cosechas, comercio y tributos. Pero la fertilidad de esta tierra también atrajo ambiciones y guerras. Cada ciudad quería controlar más canales, más cultivos, más recursos. La historia de Mesopotamia sería, desde entonces, una historia de expansión y conflicto. Reinos enteros se alzaban orgullosos, dominaban brevemente la región, solo para caer poco después bajo la sombra de otro reino más fuerte o más hábil. Y en el centro de esta incesante lucha por la supremacía permanecía la tierra misma, impasible y eterna, testigo silenciosa de las epopeyas humanas que se desplegaban sobre su suelo, de batallas que teñían sus campos de rojo y de celebraciones que llenaban sus cielos con himnos dedicados a dioses lejanos. La tierra entre ríos era más que un simple escenario, era protagonista, juez y verdugo de quienes habitaban en ella. Mesopotamia, pues, no es solo un lugar en los mapas antiguos, es el lugar donde la humanidad decidió dejar atrás la incertidumbre del nomadismo para apostar por un futuro de estabilidad, abundancia y progreso. Es el lugar donde nació la agricultura, el comercio, las leyes escritas y los primeros pasos hacia la ciencia. Un lugar que no se contentó con lo ordinario, sino que buscó lo extraordinario, elevando sus torres y templos hasta rozar el cielo mismo. El legado de Mesopotamia perdura hoy, oculto pero presente en cada aspecto de nuestra vida cotidiana. Cada vez que medimos el tiempo en minutos y segundos, cada vez que usamos el calendario o leemos palabras escritas, honramos inconscientemente el ingenio de quienes vivieron en estas llanuras. Y aunque sus civilizaciones hace tiempo que cayeron, aplastadas por la rueda imparable del tiempo y por imperios más jóvenes y ambiciosos, Mesopotamia sigue viva. Y aquí, en el principio mismo de nuestra historia, está esta tierra mítica y poderosa, cuna de maravillas y tragedias, hogar de genios y conquistadores. Aquí comenzó la verdadera epopeya humana, y es aquí, junto a estos ríos legendarios, donde nuestra narración apenas empieza. En los próximos capítulos recorreremos juntos las calles de Uruk y Babilonia. Conoceremos a reyes como Sargón y Hammurabi. Descubriremos leyendas como Gilgamesh y admiraremos el poder y la destrucción de imperios como Asiria y Babilonia. Pero antes de llegar a esos relatos épicos, era necesario que entendieras algo crucial. Todo comenzó con la tierra, el agua y un puñado de seres humanos decididos a construir su futuro junto a dos ríos inolvidables. Bienvenidos a Mesopotamia. Bienvenidos al origen de todo lo que somos hoy. Bajo la extensa bóveda del cielo de Mesopotamia, el tiempo avanzaba con pasos imperceptibles pero implacables. Las aldeas de barro que bordeaban los ríos crecían, se multiplicaban y lentamente se convertían en las primeras ciudades del mundo, y entre ellas, ninguna brilló tan intensamente ni dejó una huella tan profunda en la historia como las que se alzaron en la tierra fértil y caliente de Sumer. Imagina ese momento, hace más de 5000 años, cuando los primeros habitantes de esta región contemplaron cómo sus modestos asentamientos se transformaban en bulliciosas urbes, con calles rebosantes de mercaderes y templos monumentales alzándose hacia los cielos. Eran tiempos en los que los dioses parecían estar tan cerca que podían tocarse, en los que cada fenómeno natural tenía un significado profundo y misterioso. El pueblo de Sumer había encontrado la fórmula para domesticar las tierras fértiles entre el Tigris y el Éufrates. Pero para dominar aquella abundancia, debían enfrentar desafíos inéditos. La organización era esencial, canales para distribuir el agua, almacenes para conservar el grano y ejércitos para proteger su riqueza de invasores codiciosos. Así la civilización sumeria fue emergiendo lentamente. No como un accidente afortunado, sino como la consecuencia lógica del ingenio, el trabajo y la determinación de un pueblo. Cada ciudad sumeria era como un reino en miniatura, con su rey, su ejército, su sacerdocio y su dios protector. Ciudades como Ur, Uruk, Lagash y Kish se erigieron majestuosas, cada una rivalizando en esplendor y poder con las otras. En el corazón de estas ciudades se elevaba el zigurat, una estructura monumental construida en niveles ascendentes hacia el cielo. No eran simples templos, eran escaleras sagradas, conexiones entre los mortales y los dioses que gobernaban el universo. Pero Sumer no solo construyó ciudades impresionantes y templos que desafiaban al cielo. Este pueblo también nos legó algo aún más poderoso y duradero. Inventaron la escritura, la necesidad de llevar un registro preciso de sus cosechas, propiedades, comercio y rituales religiosos los impulsó a desarrollar un sistema para preservar la información más allá de la memoria humana. Y así nació la escritura cuneiforme, pequeñas marcas grabadas sobre arcilla húmeda con un punzón afilado, que se endurecían al sol, resistiendo el paso del tiempo. Piensa por un momento en el impacto monumental de esta invención. Hasta entonces, la memoria y la voz eran las únicas formas de preservar la historia. Ahora, por primera vez, los humanos podían registrar sus logros, sus leyes, sus creencias y su cultura en palabras inmortales que sobrevivirían a generaciones enteras. La humanidad ya nunca volvería a ser la misma. La vida cotidiana en las ciudades sumerias era intensa y variada. Las calles se llenaban del sonido constante del comercio y la actividad. Artesanos que moldeaban vasijas y utensilios, herreros que trabajaban metales preciosos, agricultores que transportaban sus cosechas hacia los almacenes centrales. Pero entre toda esta multitud había una clase especial de individuos que dirigían el curso del destino. Los sacerdotes y los escribas, custodios del saber antiguo y encargados de interpretar la voluntad de los dioses. La religión dominaba cada aspecto de la existencia sumeria. Creían fervientemente que los dioses decidían el destino de sus ciudades y la prosperidad de sus habitantes. Anu, dios del cielo, Enlil, señor del viento y la tormenta. Inanna, la feroz y seductora diosa del amor y la guerra. Y Enki, el dios de la sabiduría y las aguas dulces, formaban parte de un panteón inmenso que los sumerios veneraban y temían. Esta relación intensa con lo divino no solo guiaba la vida cotidiana, sino que alimentaba relatos épicos que influirían en culturas futuras. Ninguna historia fue tan impactante como la epopeya de Gilgamesh, rey mítico de Uruk. Gilgamesh era mitad dios y mitad hombre, heroico y tiránico a partes iguales, cuya búsqueda de la inmortalidad nos muestra no solo los valores de la antigua Sumer, sino los dilemas eternos que aún hoy persiguen a la humanidad. Mientras las ciudades crecían y las riquezas aumentaban, también lo hacían los conflictos. Las rivalidades entre las distintas ciudades-estado sumerias llevaron a guerras frecuentes por el control de tierras fértiles, rutas comerciales y prestigio religioso. El sonido de las trompetas de guerra, el resonar de carros y lanzas contra escudos y los gritos de guerreros en combate se hicieron tan familiares como las plegarias en los templos. La civilización sumeria, con su genialidad, su religiosidad profunda y su capacidad para la guerra y la paz, dejó una herencia imborrable. Pero su historia también fue una advertencia. Las guerras internas desgastaron a las ciudades y facilitaron que un poder más fuerte emergiera desde las sombras, el Imperio Acadio. Los sumerios no sabían entonces que su tiempo de gloria y dominio llegaba lentamente a su fin. Ignoraban que pronto serían absorbidos por un imperio más vasto y poderoso que tomaría lo mejor de su legado para convertirlo en una herramienta de conquista y gobierno. Sin embargo, incluso cuando la historia avanzó, el espíritu de Sumer perduró en la arcilla grabada, en las torres que rozaron el cielo y en las historias que se transmitieron de generación en generación. El brillo de la civilización sumeria, aunque breve, iluminó para siempre el camino que la humanidad seguiría en los milenios por venir. Así que cuando mires atrás hacia la aurora de nuestra civilización, recuerda a Sumer. Recuerda sus ciudades, sus dioses, sus guerras y su escritura. Y recuerda sobre todo que fue allí, en la antigua tierra entre ríos, donde la humanidad aprendió a